everyone, welcome to Plainest Pages to another poetry video. This is for those taking the CIE English Literature GCSE exam 2022, aka this year, aka in a couple of months. So time is pressing and let's get on with this short study guide. First, let's talk about the author biography and the context, and then move on to the summary and line-by-line analysis. Percy Shelley is one of the well-known poets of the English Romanticist period. I've talked about Romanticism before, check out the other videos in this playlist, but basically to summarize the main ideas of the period, a focus on nature and on its glory, a strong wish and desire of travel and imagination. It was a very idealistic movement, known as well for its emphasis on the self. It would be great if you can comment on these things and the main ideas of Romanticism to really hit the historical context knowledge sections. Shelley was in Naples from November 1818 to February 1919, and he was extremely depressed at the time because of the death of his daughter, which his wife blamed him for, and also the suicide of his first wife and his wife Mary's half-sister. For those who don't know, Mary Shelley, Percy's wife, is the author of Frankenstein. At the time, he wasn't doing really well. The literary reception of his poems weren't great, and basically, unlike the warm weather of Naples, inside he was emotionally cold and feeling very gloomy and depressed. So this is definitely not a very cheerful poem. In fact, it's a melancholy rumination on the impact that he has made with his life and just his general thoughts. So trigger warning for that, I guess. And also, I think it's significant to note that Shelley actually died by drowning, and you'll see why this is important later on when we begin to analyze the poem. In this melancholy poem, the speaker explores the beauty and loneliness of nature. He really feels the burden of the world pressing upon him. He uses such vivid imagery to show the world around him, and it's so at contrast with his own sense of giving up and just letting himself go, but at the same time it's a very harmonious feeling. It feels as if he belongs in a very organic and natural way. Remember those themes I mentioned of Romanticism and me talking about how Shelley was a very important poet in the Romanticist period? Well, this is very clearly explored in the poem with, of course, the whole idea of nature and this glorified version and the focus on individuality and the self, and of contrasting himself with those around him. And if I were to summarize the whole poem in one line, I would perhaps say that here the speaker thinks about his own experience with life, and he presents this very sad image of himself at odds with the world around him, and he feels extremely burdened by the world, and he just wants to let go and lie still and to let life continue without him. The poem is written mostly in iambic tetrameter, with some lines being longer iambic hexameters. The meter is always somewhat steady. In terms of rhyme, it's A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C, and this poem is a variation on the traditional Spenserian stanza that is usually written in iambic pentameter. It's once again interesting to comment on why you think Shelley chose this variation. Personally, I see it as this romantic desire to be like the explorer and to really let your imagination soar, because of course it being a variation, while also paying homage and respect to those that came before him, and to really demonstrate his skill and his knowledge as a writer, to be able to modify it and to create something new, but at the same time employ forms that were previously used that are famous and popularized in culture. A wish to be critically recognized here too, that he has knowledge of these previous forms, that he can use them, but to his own accord, of course, to be unique and all of that. Even with feeling down, Shelley still wanted to get his craft across to future generations, to really show his emotions while also showing that he has a grasp on poetry. It's this inability to just write things down. It's his desire to go through completely with him being a poet, to give himself completely and to present himself always as a poet. And I think it's very interesting to note that the person who popularized the Spenserian stanza in his work, The Fairy Queen, his major work, one of the main messages in that work is that one should strive to complete the quest that they're on. And so I think it is perhaps a homage to that as well, that Shelley really wants to get his words across even while he's feeling emotional and down. The sun is warm, the sky is clear, the waves are dancing fast and bright. Blue isles and snowy mountains wear the purple noon's transparent might. The breath of the moist earth is light, around its unexpanded buds. Like many, a voice of one delight, the winds, the birds, the ocean floods. The city's voice itself is soft like solitude. Notice how much the images flow. It's a list of things. Shelley hits the reader with a wave of emotions, and no sense of ours is left untouched. We have what we see in the brightness of the colors, and what we feel in the breath of the moist earth, and we can almost smell the sea. Everything is alive. It's because of the amount of personification that he uses, because of course the waves dance and the earth breezes, the city has a voice, and so does loneliness. More subtle are also the colors, I think, blue isles and the purple noons. These are colors that we typically associate with loneliness and distance. They're on the colder end of the color spectrum. They're the type of thing that if we look far ahead, we see, and it's a sort of subdued image, a sort of subdued tone. Yes, it's these vivid colors, but it's a vivid sense of loneliness rather than this like bright image and this bright temperature and happiness. Before that, there's a list of very light things. It's almost like leading you to a new idea of life, and this is called an ascendotone, and this is basically just when you list ideas and when you make them like seem coherent, and then it's almost like a lead up to a new idea. And the opposite of this is a syndeton, where you use a lot of connectives in a sentence. So for example, a lot of ands in a list of verbs. And also, of course, the image of the unexpanded buds is a very fine representation of life, because it's literally flowers rebirthing, bright image of life, of this life that's about to spring from these buds that are about to pop. And also look at the sounds of the unexpected buds and the sibilants. There's a lot of sounds that sound like S, and this sibilance is very reminiscent of perhaps the ocean fizzing and the spray. And you expect this ascendotone to lead to something bright, like an explosion of life, to those buds finally hatching, or something appropriate, something that tells us, yes, like spring is here, it's gonna be in full bloom, life is going full steam ahead. But instead we end on solitude. It's not even death, it's not even a stark idea, it's just something like solitude. And of course there were references to this before, almost like a preparation for the dejection to come, but nonetheless this dejection comes, and it's the first instance of disappointment that we get. Shelley really introduces us to what he feels, and it's not the first instance of disappointment that he's going to talk about throughout the poem. Notice also how he says voice of one delight. All of these things are a part of the harmony of the city, but it's almost like he himself is not a part of that. And I also want to comment on the use of like transparent. The sun is warm and the weather is nice, but everything has this like ephemeral quality. It exists in a perfect days of harmony. It's very at odds with like the warm weather, that he feels the sense of inner turmoil. The imagery of the ocean too is quite intense, the floods, and it's the first reference of many to the ocean as something that he values a lot in his life. And okay, I'll just talk about it being a symbol now. So the ocean is this continuous and powerful body of water, this being of nature that he values a lot. The waves always move in a way that's somewhat steady, even when it's volatile. And I think the structure of the poem really represents that. And also, if you look upon it, if you look at the whole poem sideways like this, kind of, it itself almost feels like a wave as it's washing over the shore. It's important for the speaker that the ocean is monotonous, and because he wants to give himself so completely to it, this is why he wants to drown. He wants to have it wash over him, to swallow him completely, to be part of that rhythmic part of nature that's just harmoniously going along and doing what it sees fit. And as part of your personal response, I think you should also comment on whether you think Shelley drowning is like a happy death, as in the way that he died is happy, because of course here this is what he wants, but also of course it was an untimely death and a great loss for the literary world. And okay, I am going to move on now, and I'm going to split the analysis into basically 5 stanzas, and then I'm gonna hone in on individual lines, because I don't really want to break the flow of this beautiful poem, and the full stop is only at the end, so do bear with me as I proceed to read. I see the deeps and trampled floor, with green and purple seaweed strewn. I see the waves upon the shore, like light dissolved in star showers thrown. I sit upon the sands, alone. The lightning of the noontide ocean is flashing round me in a tone arises from its measured motion. How sweet! Did any heart now share in my emotion? Here we begin to see the extent of Shelley's wish. He wants so badly to be a part of this harmony, to feel like he belongs with this world, that he wants to be buried in it, and he already sees this image. It's a desire that so strongly emanates from him that he sees it everywhere. It is this that he describes in his poem. It's almost like his ultimate wish, to see the untrampled floor. Untrampled, of course, meaning that it wasn't previously explored. There are no footsteps, and this is both a happy experience for him, as in he can finally gain peace, and it also seems a bit linking back to the whole like romanticist idea of being this wanderer and this explorer, but it also in a way seems very at odds with his own feelings, because he knows that when he sinks in there, it will no longer be untrampled. So even with his desire, he doesn't want to disturb the natural world. Again, we have continuous sibilance in the seaweed strewn, sand showers, etc., showing the soft sea sound of fizzing, or perhaps more appropriately dissolving. Sorry, once again, slight camera issues. Let's proceed. So there's a sense of getting darker as well, just like the lighting here has gotten darker. And I see this in the noontide. So as these waves progress, time in the poem passes too, as he gets closer to aging and to death, the final culmination of the poem. In the second stanza, there is also finally the use of the personal pronoun I. Finally, we have this valued sense of individuality, and the speaker takes a sudden shift from looking outside nature to looking within himself. Notice also how the deep is capitalized. It's written with a capital D, showing the importance that the speaker feels towards it. First it was this beautiful like light, star showers, etc., and now it's suddenly lightning, because the ocean is volatile. This deep is not just this massive calm, it's also a sense of innate like nature power that the ocean has, but that he does not have, and that he wants to be a part of. Notice also how smooth the transitions are from going like outside to going within, and I think it really speaks to what Shelley feels about himself right now, as in he is very like go with the flow. He's just letting himself be carried by life now. In his sadness, he's not really taking charge of his life. The did any heart now share my emotion is also not even a question. It's heavily implied that the answer is no, but it's said as a statement. Alas, I have nor hope nor health, nor peace within, nor calm around, nor that content surpassing wealth the sage in meditation found, and walked with inward glory crowned, nor fame nor power nor love nor leisure. Others I see whom these surround, smiling they live, and call life pleasure. To me that cup has been dealt in another measure. Once again, we have another turn, this time to the internal volatility of the speaker, and the tone becomes flat and accepting. Alas is an expression of let it be, right? It seems that this would be a very emotional outburst on his part, but because he no longer feels anything towards this, it does not really matter. And the reason that he has no feeling is because he has no hope and also no health and no vibrancy in life that he sees around him in the raging sea or the bright light or the flowers about to blossom. He doesn't have any internal meaning and purpose that can surpass the wealth. These are the things that he posits as like the important things in life, right? As the things that we can use that won't necessarily hold us down if we don't have money or financial means, but he has neither of these things, so he doesn't really have a means to escape his own cage of being in dejection. The repetition of nor further emphasizes the negativity and emptiness, and let's also look at the lack of material things in this stanza. So before, notice how he was not tethered to this world, drifting by, seeing this nature going past him. Now he sets out clearly that he has no money, that he has no love because of the difficult situation with Mary. And I think it's also interesting to note that Shelley himself was rather comfortable in life, and I think this really reflects the difference between what he actually has and what he feels he has. And it's this disparity as well that's feeding in further to his despair, because he has money but he has no value of it, and he feels almost like he has no money because for him it's not as important as those other things that he mentioned. There's also a repetition of aspirant H sounds showing like the emptiness. It's almost as if the speaker is going like he's letting his breath out. It's almost like he's already losing weight and becoming transparent, as I mentioned before. And there's some scorn in the final lines, as in he disapproves of all those seeing life as pleasure. For him, it's another measure. He sees the true nature of his loneliness. And you could also, like, once again mention the fatalistic attitude in the word dealt. He sees it as fate handing out these cards, and this is just his measure. There's this sense of disdain towards the people who just like don't look at their solitude and at the world around them, who are just content in having money and wealth, etc. And he contrasts with this idea of them and us to further show his loneliness. And I think that you could also talk about the idea of a cup half full, glass half empty, like that type of idea here, because he says the cup has been dealt in another measure. Yet now despair itself is mild, even as the winds and waters are. I could lie down like a tired child and weep away the life of care, which I have borne and yet must bear, till death like sleep might steal on me, and I might feel in the warm air my cheek grow cold and hear the sea breathe o'er my dying brain in its last monotony. Once again, we have another volta, another swing of the sea, another change in mood, and this time, of course, it begins with yet another connective showing contradiction. And before we felt poignantly the pain of despair, but now it transforms into something more mild as the speaker settles down, as he feels like a tired child. And if you've ever seen a tired child, you're looking at one right now. I think that there's two main ways that children express that they're tired. One is they just like lie down and all the emotion drains out of them. They physically can't move anymore. And the other response is like aggression and tears. And I think this is both here, because the tears that he weeps out are of course just like the relinquishing of all the cares that he has in life, of all the burdens that he carries. But it's also him showing that, come on, like he can't go on anymore. He's almost like begging us to let him go, to just let him rest as this tired child, to let the sea engulf him completely. By giving himself to the sea, by allowing himself to be swallowed by the great wave, he really says that he doesn't want anything, any burden that comes later, even in death. Like, for example, all the coffin things and the picking an outfit and the writing a will. He just wants to be swallowed by the sea and to say, this is it, let the tired child rest. And the sea is almost like a blanket as well. It covers him, right? It's almost as if he's asking us to let nature be the blanket, be the thing that comforts him in his rest. Some might lament that I were cold, as I, when the sweet day is gone, which my lost heart, too soon grown old, insults with this untimely moan. They might lament, for I am one, whom men love not, and yet regret, unlike this day which when the sun shall on its stainless glory set, will linger though enjoyed, like joy in memory yet. He then goes on to talk about those that will grieve, but not in the sense of grief as in like crying by his coffin every day, the sense of like utter giving oneself, but as this image of grief as rather well, he's gone, you know, as grief of those seeing a beautiful day in nature pass and end. He mentions how the heart insults the day, the heart as in stopping, as in nature is almost sympathetic to his death more so than people. In a way, it's very harsh, right? It's unaccepting, but it's also the thing that will grieve that he has ruined this beautiful day with his death, and it will accept him even with his loss, even with all his faults. It will take his body and it is fine with him becoming one with the ocean. And his death, the reason that it doesn't like it is because his death is untimely, it's unnatural, and perhaps this is the reason that Shelley hasn't gone ahead and done it yet, because he values nature and he wants his death to be natural too, even through all the suffering. He is not liked by men, and I think men is like a linkage to wider humanity, to people in general. At the end, and this is very important, he says that the regret will linger, that it's not like the day after all which will disappear in stainless glory, and people would just like look back and be like, oh, that was a nice day, and then that's it. They discard it. They look ahead as new days come. It's this desire for revival, for those new unblossomed buds, right? But his death, it will be like regret. It's almost like a happy thought after all. He's saying that his memory is powerful. He's almost like a part of nature, and at the same time something else entirely. People will even enjoy the regrets, and it will last longer. I know that was a lot, so let's just recap in one sentence. The speaker says that unlike the beautiful sunsets, he will be remembered. And while he won't be remembered as a happy, optimistic, joyful, contributing member of society, people will regret his passing, just his being as a person. And over time, this regret will also blossom into a sort of joy, a sort of like happy memory that they remember that they got to know him. And I feel like even with all the previous notes of I'm not like the rest of humanity, I would rather die, I would rather be one with nature, who even cares, I'm completely weighed down by the burden of existence, there's just something so innately human about this poem after all, in his desire to not be forgotten, to completely disregard what we should by now probably accept, that we don't make a mark in the long run. And it's this desire that Shelley throws away that says, well, who cares that you don't really like me? Who cares? Because I have made a mark. At least I will stay with you longer than the day. And even with all this previous themes of loneliness, it's almost like he's making that final mark, and he won't be lonely as we connect with him throughout the years. And I think he would be happy to know that we still read him even today. So yeah, that concludes the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped. If it did, please leave a like and a subscribe. It really does mean a lot. So see you soon.